What's up, kings and queens? It's your boy Dan from Daft Previews. We are on the road again. You guys really seem to like the last video, so I thought let's do another one. So today, the topic we're going to be talking about is defense versus position. So it's something very close to my heart, and it's something I've adapted against over recent times. But I'll give you my thoughts on that. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section, whether you buy in, whether you're on the same side as me, whether you think I'm a piece of shit. Regardless, we're going to talk about it anyway. That sounds interesting? Let's go. Sub to the channel because your boy's getting busy. Coming to you live from the west side of Sydney. We got the free picks and the juice and the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me. Let's go. Man, I enjoy that. Hopefully you enjoy that too, because if you don't, I'm probably going to stop doing these videos altogether. But in all seriousness, I've wanted to make a video about this topic for quite some time, really since the start of the season. I just haven't really had the time to do it. But given my new circumstances, as a full-time carer, doing pickups and drop-offs every single day, I do have a little bit more time to make some more content. So let's talk about it, defense versus position. Now, in past years, probably middle of last year and everything before that, I was very big on defense versus position. You go on to Fantasy Pros, you look at defense position, points, rebounds, assists allowed, to whatever the position is of the player that you're looking at. Then, if I use my basketball knowledge, I will then try to piece the puzzle as to how this happens. So, if they give up a lot of points to guards, how do they give up points to guards? What do I know? Rebounds to centers. What is it about that, right? So, over the last year and a half, so middle of last season, I kind of pivoted away from that mindset of thinking. And the whole reason being is the NBA has evolved to the point where a lot of players are positionless. So, realistically, you have a point guard, that's still a true position, and you have a center, pretty much. But centers are built so differently these days, even that has an extra layer towards it. So, like, there are some teams who give up, the most points to centers. And in the past seasons, you would take a lot of centers against the Washington Wizards, and you'd still do that this year. But now they understand things a little bit deeper, and the fact that centers aren't built differently, they are built differently, then that kind of changes the way that I approach the game and what I'm betting on. So, for example, if we just talk about centers, even though that is a true position, it's not necessarily positionless, there's so many different types of centers. You've got centers of the Porzingis mold, which are going to stretch the floor, probably not rebound very well, but they'll protect the rim. From Kristaps Porzingis to up-and-coming ones like Alex Sarr, Miles Turner, right? So these are your stretch centers. But then you've got your Jokic type of centers as well, who can shoot, they can go back to the basket, they can score in a wide range of ways. It's your Jokic's, your Şengün's, your Sabonises, like these European type of centers, they're their own different breed. But then you've got those, I don't want to call them meathead type of centers, but that's really what they are. Like, you've got your Jalen Durans who bang down low, and a lot of centers of that ilk, maybe Jarrett Allen to a certain extent, very heavy in the pick and roll. But then you've also got a different type of center, and that is, who am I thinking of right now? Who's the type of center that comes to mind? Shit. Not preparing for these things suck. But yeah, there's a different type of big that I can't think of right now. But what I'm trying to illustrate there is that even for centers, it is a designated position. I wouldn't call them positionless. There's still a different range of centers to deal with. But then you have to deal with point guards, right? There are point guards who score, there are point guards who pass. But even how they score is extremely different. But a lot of the time you can get away with defense versus position for point guards because a lot of them score the same way. Just the percentages of where they get their points from. A lot of point guards are very pick and roll dominant. They're very above the break three dominant. And there's some point guards who can take it to the hole. But there are also a lot of point guards who can stop in that paint non-restricted area and shoot the mid-range, like a Jalen Brunson, a De'Aaron Fox, for example, or Kyrie Irving. Like, there's different levels to point guards in scoring, but for the most part, a lot of them do score the same way. So if you looked at defense versus position and you looked points allowed to point guards, most of the time, that's a pretty safe angle to look at because a lot of point guards score the same way. But then when you look at points to shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards, That's when it gets real murky, because I would say a lot of those three positions, they all do the same stuff. You're not your center and you're not your point guard. You're playing off the ball. You're hitting the wings. You go from corner to corner. You might run a couple pick and pops, but for the most part, you're designated to the wings and the corners, and those three types of positions, pretty much the same. But what you'll find, there's different types of wing players. You've got 3 and D players. So on offense, they strictly just shoot 3-pointers. And there's a lot of players just like that. You've also got a lot of slashers and transition type wings. And there are a lot of players who are like that. There aren't too many Kevin Durant's of the world, if I'm being honest with you. There's not many wing players that you can just feed the rock to and let them go to work. Paul George is too old for that shit. Like, there's not too many of them left. So when you look at points to shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards, it's not a very reliable source of data. Instead, what I prefer to do is look at different play types and matchups. Combined, obviously, you take into consideration the position part, but you need to understand why. So for example, there's a lot of teams who give up points to power forwards and small forwards. And the whole reason that exists is because these teams traditionally give up a lot of weak side 3-pointers. They leave 3-point shooters wide open, which is, if your point guard and your center are running the pick and roll so often and there's a lot of penetration, there are designated shooters from each team who sit in the corner, and some teams are just terrible at defending that. So what you'll find is these teams likely give up a lot of points to power forwards and small forwards. Now, the other thing I want to talk about when it comes to defense versus position, another thing to factor in is stuff like rebounds, for example, right? Because the one thing I want to call out here with rebounds is that let's say if it's rebounds to point guards, I would not rely on that stat whatsoever, because point guards are built differently, right? They're built very differently, and who they defend actually impacts their ability to rebound. So there are some point guards like a Cade Cunningham who are a lot bigger, but there are small point guards like Darius Garland who are a lot smaller, and they can't really keep up defensively. And depending on their ability to play defense, it impacts who they're going to defend. So what you'll often find is a lot of guards, which are star players, these guys typically don't defend the other point guards. They don't do that. They typically look for the weakest defender on the other team, who's often weakest scorer on the other team, who's often a catch and shoot player, and that point guard would then defend them. So there are times, depending on the matchup and who they're playing, that these players will actually get a lot of rebounds because they're not defending the other point guard. They're sitting on the weak side and they can get rebounds that way. But there are some point guards who will defend the other point guard, and at times makes it difficult for them to get rebounds. So let's just say there's a team like the Boston Celtics, right? The Boston Celtics do give up a lot of rebounds to guards. And the reason for that is the guards for the Boston Celtics, Drew Holiday, let's just call him out, and Derek White, they're low usage players who typically sit on the weak side. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, they demand a lot of the rock, they get a lot of attention. So if you're defending one of those guys, there is a good chance that you're going to be in a good position to get rebounds, especially with the amount of 3-pointers that happen to go. But let's just say that you're a guard and you're a sizable guard, and you end up having to match up with Jaylen Brown, and Jaylen Brown's your key matchup. Suddenly, you're not going to be defending a Drew Holiday on the weak side. You're going to be defending on ball. So suddenly, the rebounds to guard equation gets thrown out, because if you're defending Jaylen Brown the whole time, you're not going to be in position to get boards. So what I'm trying to illustrate there is a lot of it is very dependent on matchups, play styles, who's defending who, especially if you're looking at rebounds. Now, when it comes to assists are a pretty safe spot to look at when you're looking at assist to point guards, because a lot of them get their assists the same way. But then assist to shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards, centers, whatever it may be, then that actually centers might be a little bit more reliable, because outside of Jokic, Şengün, Sabonis, all the other centers are getting assists the very same way, and that's a lot of handoff action, a lot of screens to buckets. So I think the center one, assists allowed to centers, I think that's a pretty good, reliable metric. But at the same time, one thing you want to check with that is, does the player that you're betting on, does he participate in a lot of handoff actions? Because if there's no handoff actions, it's going to be impossible for them to get the assist. Regardless if the Denver Nuggets give up the most assists to centers, if that center doesn't do handoff actions and they don't see the ball, then it's going to be hard for them to get it anyway. So, but when it comes to shooting guards, small forwards, power forwards, when it's assists allowed to those specific positions, I honestly don't think that matters at all. Like, so I would throw that out the window because there's a specific play type which comes to those teams. So if you can understand the play type and how they allow those assists, whether it be, do they allow a lot of assist drop-offs to the basket? Then you look at a player who gets a lot of assists driving and dishing to the basket. Or do they get a lot of assists to the corner three? Now, corner threes typically happen in two ways. It's usually penetration, touch the paint, and then it's a kick out to the corner three. Or you attack the weak side, you drive and dish, and then it's a swing around the perimeter. So a lot of times, someone on the wing will find somebody in the corner and shoot that way. So you need to understand where teams give up assists, how players get their assists, and just throw the assist against position out the window. I would say anything outside of point guards, because I don't really rely on that metric. It's not a great one for me. What else is there? Points, rebounds, assists. I think that's really the main one. And I think it's a good chance to call this out. Like, if you want access to that level of data that I'm talking about, you need to be using Props Madness. They already have the best tool out there when you're looking at advanced data for stuff on the NBA and the WNBA. Like, all the stuff that I'm talking about, you can find on Props Madness. You can find how they get assists, what spot on the court they get the assists. You can also correlate that with how the players score. So it's a fantastic tool. I encourage you guys to check that out. You'll get a 7-day free trial and you'll get 25% off if you use the code DAFT when you happen to sign up. But Props Madness can help all of that. And if you do like if it gives you some sort of confidence to bet on a player because the other team allows X to X, Props Madness has that built in anyway. Like, you can still use Props Madness and use that as a reference point. What I'm saying is that things have evolved. You can't just make a bet because the Orlando Magic give up the second most points to shooting guards, so you bet on a shooting guard. Like, that doesn't make any sense to me, because the shooting guards score in so many different ways. And what is a shooting guard anyway? Like, they're very hard to define. So I use it as a reference point, but I need to understand why. So if teams give up a lot of X to X, then I dive a little bit deeper to understand why. Because if I can understand why, then you can try to anticipate and predict that happening again. And then that kind of improves your chances to get there. But I can see a lot of people out there online haven't evolved and adapted from the way things used to be. And I'm not saying that, like, it's the wrong thing to do. Like, I was running the defense versus position angle for years, up until the middle of last season. And I was still winning bets that way. But when you understand more, it makes it a little bit easier to understand how things are going to happen. So if you understand how things could happen, it makes it a little bit easier to anticipate whether they will. But that's all I've got for you. I'm hitting close to my destination. I hope you guys enjoyed that. If there are other topics that you want me to cover off, just let me know in the comment section below. And given I pick my daughter up 5 days a week, I'm going to have ample opportunity to talk through it. So I appreciate you. If you made it this far into the video, please like, subscribe, comment, all that good stuff. And I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.